before the rise of kingdoms, before the longships cast their shadows across foreign shores, there was a quiet land in the far north, a place of deep forests, cold seas, and wide, starlit skies. Here, in the lands we now know as Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, the story of the Vikings began. But not with battle, and not with conquest. It began with stillness, with survival, and with centuries of quiet preparation. 400s of years, long before the first raids, these northern peoples lived in small, self-reliant communities. They were farmers and herders, hunters and craftsmen, mothers spinning wool by the hearth, and children learning to fish the icy streams. Their lives followed the rhythm of the seasons, sowing in the spring, harvesting in autumn, enduring the long, dark winters with stories, skill, and faith. They worshipped old gods, Odin, Thor, Freyja, and built their identities around kinship, land, and honor. But over time, something began to change. Slowly, quietly, a transformation was underway. The old tribal systems were giving way to new social structures. Trade networks stretched farther. Seafaring knowledge grew more advanced. The challenges of a changing climate, limited farmland, and growing populations began to push people outward, first to nearby coasts, then to distant, unfamiliar shores. By the late 700s, they were ready not only to survive at home, but to reach beyond it. A new age was beginning, one of movement, contact, and impact. In this episode of Restful Historian, we'll journey through the entire history of the Viking Age. From the final days of the Roman world to the close of the Viking Age in the 11th century, we'll explore how these northern peoples changed the course of European history. We'll follow their rise from isolated farming communities to skilled navigators, bold raiders, and powerful settlers. We'll look not only at the famous battles and expeditions, but also at the ships they built, the gods they prayed to, the laws they followed, and the daily lives they lived, from the jarls in their great halls to the thralls who labored silently beneath them. This is not a romanticized tale of warriors in horned helmets, nor a one-dimensional image of pirates and plunder. It is a balanced, in-depth narrative, one shaped by archaeology, myth, written history, and the voices of those who lived long ago. So let us begin at the beginning. In the lands of fjords and forests, of long winters and quiet strength. The world that existed before the raids. The world that made the Vikings possible. Our journey into the Viking Age begins not with the roar of battle, but with a gentle look at their homeland. For centuries leading up to the famed raids of the late 8th century, the lands of Scandinavia, what we know today as Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, were nurturing societies that were far from simple. This long period, often recognized as the Germanic Iron Age and the Vendel period in its later stages, roughly from 550 to 790 CE, was a time of steady internal development. It saw a slow but clear shift away from direct Roman influences towards their own unique Nordic cultural identities. Within their dramatic fjords, deep forests, and fertile plains, communities were steadily growing and changing, slowly accumulating wealth and establishing vital connections with the wider world, preparing the ground for what was to come. Geographically, Scandinavia was a place of powerful contrasts and abundant natural gifts, profoundly shaping the lives, skills, and ambitions of its people. Norway, for instance, with its breathtaking, ice-carved fjords and a rugged coastline stretching for thousands of miles, naturally drew its people to the sea. These deep, winding inlets offered safe, natural harbors and protected sea lanes, encouraging a life deeply connected to fishing, coastal travel, and eventually, daring voyages. While its towering mountains limited vast stretches of good farming land, this very challenge often nudged its people to develop exceptional seafaring skills and to look outwards, seeking new opportunities and resources beyond their immediate shores. Denmark, by contrast, was a flatter land, blessed with more fertile ground perfect for agriculture. Its strategic position at the mouth of the Baltic Sea made it a natural gateway for maritime commerce, a bustling crossroads where goods and ideas flowed between north and south, east and west. Sweden, with its vast, timber-rich forests, countless sparkling lakes, and access to both the North Sea and the Baltic via intricate river systems, supported a diverse way of life. Here, people skillfully combined farming with hunting, trapping valuable furs, and managing long overland trade routes through dense wilderness. This rich variety of landscapes meant that each region developed its own unique strengths, encouraging robust internal connections and complex trade networks that stretched far beyond their immediate homes. Socially, these communities were organized into complex, often fiercely independent tribal societies. Power resided with local chieftains, known as jarls or earls, who ruled over their own territories, which could range from a single prosperous village to a small, influential kingdom. These jarls were more than just rulers. They were vital protectors of their people, providers of essential resources, and generous hosts, solidifying their authority through their accumulated wealth, their prowess in battle, and the fierce, personal loyalty of their free followers, often called huskarls. These huskarls formed the disciplined core of their fighting forces and were frequently feasted and honored in their lords' great halls, strengthening the bonds of fealty. Below the jarls were the bondi, the free farmers. These self-reliant individuals were the backbone of society, owning their own land and largely self-sufficient, yet they also owed loyalty and sometimes military service to their local chieftain. They held significant legal rights and actively participated in local assemblies called things. These gatherings were not just judicial courts where laws were declared and disagreements settled through intricate legal proceedings rooted in ancient oral traditions. They were also vital forums for making important community decisions and debating shared concerns. While seemingly democratic, the decisions at the things were often heavily influenced by the persuasive power and prestige of the most powerful families. At the very bottom of society were the thralls, or slaves, tragically often taken as captives during raids or conflicts. They performed the hardest and most vital labor, from working the fields and forests to mining, forming a crucial, yet tragically oppressed, segment of society. In this world, honor and a good reputation, Latin letter G, were paramount. They were the invisible currency that shaped every interaction, guiding how people acted, influencing family alliances, driving fierce competitions between rival clans, and often escalating into complex cycles of feuds and revenge. These disputes, sometimes resolved through meticulously observed laws at the things, or tragically through brutal combat, underscored the deep-seated need to maintain one's honor and avoid shame, a powerful motivator for both individual actions and collective undertakings. Economically, Scandinavia was undergoing a significant transformation, steadily moving beyond mere subsistence. While agriculture remained the bedrock, providing essential grains like barley and oats, sustaining robust populations of cattle, sheep, and pigs, and supplying vital dairy products, there was a clear and growing emphasis on resource exploitation and long-distance trade. Iron ore, for example, found abundantly in their boggy lands, was painstakingly extracted and smelted in primitive furnaces, a laborious process. The resulting metal was then skillfully worked by talented smiths into essential tools for farming, potent weapons for warfare, and intricate household implements. Timber, plentiful in their vast forests, was not just for building homes and providing fuel, it was also a crucial export and, most critically, the fundamental building block for their burgeoning shipyards. Hunting and fishing provided furs, animal hides, meat, and valuable commodities like gleaming walrus ivory and durable whalebone, which were highly sought after in foreign markets. Early trade networks were already well established and expanding, reaching across the Baltic Sea to connect with Slavic and Finnic peoples in the east, and across the North Sea to continental Germanic tribes. Goods exchanged included valuable amber, luxurious furs, durable iron products, and, tragically, slaves. In return, they received fine pottery, shimmering glass, intricate jewelry, and, crucially, silver coinage from the wealthier lands to the south and west. This proto-commercial activity fostered essential navigational skills, sharpened their understanding of foreign cultures and their demands, and instilled a keen awareness of distant markets and their potential riches. Emerging trading centers within Scandinavia itself, like Ribe in Denmark and Hedeby in its early form, were already showing clear signs of future commercial hubs, acting as magnets for goods and people. Crucially, the centuries leading up to 793 CE witnessed truly significant advancements in maritime technology, particularly in shipbuilding. While the iconic longship that would later define the Viking Age was still evolving into its ultimate form, earlier vessels were already remarkably capable and sophisticated. Archaeological discoveries, such as the beautifully preserved Nidum and Kvalsund boats, dating back hundreds of years before the Viking Age officially began, offer compelling and tangible evidence. These finds demonstrate a profound understanding of clinker-built construction, a masterful technique where overlapping wooden planks were meticulously joined together with countless iron rivets. This ingenious method created hulls that were both incredibly flexible, allowing them to ride gracefully over even large, challenging waves, and exceptionally robust, capable of enduring the most violent North Atlantic storms. These early ships, though perhaps not yet fully optimized for the very deepest ocean voyages of later centuries, were incredibly efficient for coastal travel, river navigation, and remarkably capable of carrying substantial loads of cargo or a significant number of warriors. This deep, accumulated knowledge of shipbuilding, honed over generations, combined with a sophisticated understanding of tides, currents, changing weather patterns, and the subtle guidance of celestial navigation, meant that by the late 8th century, the Scandinavians possessed the means not only to sustain their lives at home but also to confidently project their power, their insatiable curiosity, and their growing ambition far beyond their traditional shores. Their ships were more than just transport. They were the key, unlocking new possibilities and a world waiting to be explored. Thus, the Viking Age did not suddenly explode out of a historical void. It emerged as the culmination of centuries of gradual development within a dynamic, resourceful, and internally competitive society. A people who had meticulously developed complex social structures, cultivated strong economic drives for expansion, and, most critically, forged an unparalleled mastery of maritime technology. The stage was not merely set, it was meticulously prepared, piece by painstaking piece, over generations. The fuse was lit, and the spark of opportunity, a confluence of growing internal pressures, the allure of easy wealth, and a fragmented, vulnerable European landscape, was all that was needed to ignite the powerful fury from the north, changing their own destiny and the world forever. The meticulous development within Scandinavian society, its evolving social structures, robust economy, and, crucially, its advanced maritime technology had meticulously prepared the stage. For centuries, a powerful potential had been brewing in the north. All that was truly needed was the catalyst, the spark that would ignite an era of unprecedented expansion, forever changing the course of European history. That spark, perhaps the most infamous and reverberating event in all of Viking history, occurred on a seemingly ordinary summer day, June 8, 793 CE. On that fateful day, from the cold, unpredictable North Sea, they emerged from the dawn mists. They were not the familiar traders or occasional merchants that sometimes visited distant shores, but a terrifying new breed of seaborne invaders. The monks of the holy island of Lindisfarne, a tranquil monastic haven off the coast of Northumbria in what is now England, witnessed the horrifying arrival of foreign ships. These vessels, with their distinctive, often dragon-headed prows, cut menacingly through the waves, a sight never before seen with such hostile intent. Lindisfarne was far more than just a monastery. It was a beacon of Christian piety and scholarship, a revered center of learning, brimming with priceless religious artifacts, gold, silver, and precious illuminated manuscripts. Critically, and tragically, it was utterly undefended. What followed was an act of profound sacrilege that sent genuine shockwaves of fear and outrage across the entire Christian world. The monastery was mercilessly plundered, its treasures seized, its altars desecrated. Monks were either brutally slain where they stood or dragged away in chains to face lives as thralls or slaves. This was no mere act of coastal piracy. It was a deliberate, targeted assault on a cherished symbol of wealth and spiritual authority. For many contemporaries, like the horrified scholar Alcuin of York, who wrote of the devastation, it marked the terrifying, undeniable beginning of what historians would forever call the Viking Age. But what precisely motivated these early, devastating expeditions? Why did this sudden, brutal explosion of violence occur at this specific moment in history, and why did they target places like Lindisfarne? The drivers behind these initial incursions were a complex interplay of internal Scandinavian dynamics, the compelling vulnerabilities of their European targets, and a decisive, unmatched technological superiority. From Scandinavia's perspective, their homeland, there were several deeply compelling factors at play. While the precise role of population pressure remains a subject of careful debate among historians, it is highly likely that growing numbers in certain regions began to strain the available agricultural land, especially in fertile areas. This would have subtly compelled ambitious young men, perhaps those without strong land claims, and powerful chieftains to seek new opportunities and fortunes abroad. The pursuit of wealth and prestige was paramount in their society. Raiding offered a swift, direct, and often glorious path to acquire vast amounts of silver, gold, luxurious goods, and slaves. These treasures were essential for displaying status, reinforcing political power, and rewarding loyal followers, thus strengthening a chieftain's hold. Furthermore, the fiercely competitive nature of chieftaincies and ongoing internal feuding within Scandinavia itself could have provided a grim training ground for warriors. It also potentially pushed defeated factions or ambitious individuals outwards, encouraging them to seek new arenas for glory and plunder, or simply to escape dangerous local conflicts. Crucially, the external European landscape presented irresistible vulnerabilities that the Norse were uniquely positioned to exploit. The wealthy monasteries of Christian Europe were, in essence, undefended treasuries, easily accessible targets for raiders who came from the sea. Beyond the churches, prosperous coastal towns and burgeoning trade centers also presented tempting targets. The fragmented political landscape of the British Isles, divided into numerous, often squabbling Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, meant there was no single, unified defense. Similarly, the vast, yet increasingly strained, Carolingian Empire on the continent, which began to face internal divisions after the death of Charlemagne, lacked centralized naval defenses or swift, cohesive responses. European armies of the period were largely organized for land warfare, making them slow and ineffective against rapid maritime incursions. This unfortunate confluence of rich, vulnerable targets and inadequate defenses created a fertile ground for Viking operations. It's also worth noting that while often violent, some initial interactions might have blurred the lines between desperate trade and outright raiding, as Norse traders, now capable of reaching distant shores, could swiftly turn to coercion if opportunities for profit arose. However, none of this widespread, swift, and utterly devastating impact would have been conceivable without their ultimate, defining technological advantage, the longship. These were not simply boats, they were engineering marvels, unparalleled in their time. The longship's most distinctive feature was its shallow draft, meaning it sat very high in the water. This enabled it to navigate not only the treacherous open oceans but also shallow coastal waters and, critically, deep into inland river systems. This capability allowed Vikings to penetrate far into enemy territories, striking unsuspecting towns and cities deep within the continent, far from the sea, where they were least expected. Its clinker-built construction, a masterful technique where overlapping wooden planks were meticulously joined together with countless iron rivets, resulted in a hull that was both incredibly flexible, allowing them to ride gracefully over even large, challenging waves, adapting to the sea rather than fighting it, and exceptionally robust, capable of enduring the most violent North Atlantic storms. Renowned for their speed, longships were propelled efficiently by both a large square sail and numerous oars, making them exceptionally difficult for slower European vessels to intercept or pursue. Their design also optimized for capacity, allowing them to carry a significant number of well-armed warriors, along with their plunder and supplies. Vikings could disembark rapidly onto unprepared beaches, strike with terrifying speed and precision, and vanish just as quickly, leaving chaos in their wake. The longship was truly the quintessential platform for the Viking raid, a potent symbol of their maritime superiority, the cutting edge of their strategic advantage, and the undeniable harbinger of their fury. The initial impact of these raids, from 793 to approximately 850 CE, was one of profound terror and devastating psychological warfare. Contemporary chronicles from monasteries and royal courts across Europe lamented the suddenness and brutal efficiency of these attacks, often describing the raiders as a fury from the north or a pagan scourge sent by God as divine punishment. Records from Ireland, for example, such as the Annals of Ulster, document increasingly frequent and devastating attacks on its prosperous monastic centers from the late 8th century onwards, with major sites like Armagh, a significant religious and intellectual hub, being tragically ravaged multiple times. As the 9th century truly progressed, these raids rapidly intensified and expanded in both scale and geographical reach. Targets evolved from isolated monasteries to include thriving coastal trading centers, undefended towns, and even significant cities. The scale of the expeditions grew significantly, transitioning from small, opportunistic raiding parties to larger, more organized fleets, sometimes comprising dozens of ships and hundreds, even thousands, of seasoned warriors. In Ireland, the Vikings began to establish rudimentary but strategically crucial coastal bases, known as longforts, fortified ship encampments. These allowed them to launch more sustained attacks, overwinter in foreign lands, and manage their accumulating plunder, fundamentally transforming seasonal hit-and-run raids into more persistent and profound threats. Places like Dublin, Waterford, and Cork would eventually grow from these early Viking strongholds, laying the very foundations for future cities. In Francia, the extensive and navigable river systems became strategic highways for their increasingly bold incursions. Viking fleets fearlessly ascended major rivers like the Seine, the Loire, and the Rhine, penetrating deep inland to plunder wealthy communities like Rouen. During this period, the concept of danegeld, a tribute or payment demanded by Vikings in exchange for sparing a town or region from attack, also began to emerge. This was a crucial development, signaling a strategic shift from pure plunder to organized extortion, a form of economic warfare. While most of their activity remained concentrated in northern and western Europe, there were early probes and explorations further south, hinting at the vast ambitions that would soon unfold. It's important to understand that while the raid on Lindisfarne is universally recognized as the symbolic start of the Viking Age, it was likely not the absolute first contact between Norse people and wider Europe. Earlier, less documented trading interactions, isolated acts of piracy, or smaller skirmishes might well have occurred. However, Lindisfarne marked the undeniable moment when the Northmen became a widespread, sustained, and terrifying force, a powerful and utterly transformative new presence on the European stage, whose actions would irrevocably alter the course of medieval history. This early period of the Viking Age was defined by brutal efficiency and terrifying unpredictability. Yet, beneath the chaos and violence lay a burgeoning strategic ambition, a drive that would soon pivot from mere opportunistic raiding to something far more profound: large-scale settlement, systematic conquest, and the forging of new destinies. The stage was now fully set for the next dramatic phase, as these early probes gave way to grander, more permanent designs. The early raids, though terrifying and devastating, were, in a sense, but the first whispers of a storm, the ripples preceding a far greater tide. As the 9th century truly progressed, the Viking approach matured, evolving with remarkable speed and ambition. No longer content with merely striking swiftly for portable wealth and then retreating to their northern homelands, they began to stay, to overwinter, transforming temporary raiding expeditions into enduring, often permanent, presences. This marked a profound strategic shift, signaling an ambition that moved decisively beyond mere plunder towards a deep-seated desire for land, for power, and for lasting settlement. The age of the small, swift raiding party began to give way to the era of the mighty great armies. By the mid-9th century, what arrived on the shores of Western Europe was no longer a scattering of individual longships. Instead, enormous, coordinated fleets, carrying thousands of disciplined, seasoned warriors, became a common and terrifying sight. These were not simply bands of opportunistic raiders, but highly organized military forces, often led by ambitious kings, renowned chieftains, or groups of powerful brothers, all driven by a shared, long-term strategy. They had learned valuable lessons from their earlier successes and failures, meticulously adapting their tactics. Now, they came with a clear and undeniable intent, not just to take quick plunder, but to conquer and to hold the land, to establish a new way of life. Nowhere was this dramatic transformation from raider to settler more evident, or its impact more keenly felt, than in the British Isles. In England, the arrival of what the Anglo-Saxon chronicles famously, and fearfully, called the Great Heathen Army in 865 CE, was a monumental turning point. This was an unprecedented force, far larger, more unified, and more strategically focused than anything the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms had ever encountered. Its renowned leaders, figures whose names would echo through history like Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan Ragnarsson, and Guthrum, were driven by a long-term goal of conquest and settlement. This wasn't a seasonal raid, it was a sustained military campaign. They systematically moved through the various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, not just raiding, but fighting pitched battles, conquering royal strongholds, and eventually establishing lasting control. One by one, the ancient, independent kingdoms of East Anglia, Northumbria, and Mercia fell under their relentless sway. Important Anglo-Saxon towns like York, once a thriving Roman settlement and then a vital Anglo-Saxon city, were swiftly captured and transformed into major Viking strongholds, bustling centers of Norse power, trade, and even culture. The struggle was fierce and desperate, embodying a profound clash of cultures and wills, a pagan, seafaring people against Christian, agrarian kingdoms. While many Anglo-Saxon realms crumbled under the pressure, one king stood remarkably firm, Alfred the Great of Wessex. Through a brilliant and determined combination of strategic resistance, tactical retreats, and innovative military reforms, such as building fortified towns known as burhs, reorganizing his army into rotating shifts, and commissioning a new navy, Alfred managed to halt the seemingly unstoppable Viking advance. His pivotal victory at the Battle of Edington in 878 CE forced a profound turning point. The result was a landmark peace treaty, the Treaty of Wedmore, which formally established the Danelaw. This was a vast area in eastern England where Norse law, customs, and forms of governance prevailed, and where Vikings settled extensively as farmers, craftsmen, and landowners. This was no mere occupation, it was a profound socio-political change, laying the foundations for a new, hybrid society in a significant portion of England, influencing its language, countless place names, and legal traditions for centuries to come, a testament to the deep impact of Norse settlement. Meanwhile, Ireland experienced its own equally profound transformation, though with a different trajectory. Already a frequent target for early raids, the Vikings soon established permanent coastal settlements, known as long forts, which rapidly grew into thriving, fortified towns. Dublin, perhaps the most famous and enduring, along with Waterford, Wexford, Cork, and Limerick, evolved from these early encampments into crucial Viking trading hubs and urban centers. These were not merely military bases. They became bustling commercial cities, connecting Ireland to a vast Norse trading network that stretched from Scandinavia across the North Sea to continental Europe and even further east. Here, the Vikings often integrated more deeply with the native Irish population than in England, intermarrying and fostering a unique Hiberno Norse culture, marked by distinct art styles, coinage, and complex political alliances that would shape Ireland's destiny for centuries, often involving both cooperation and conflict with the native Irish kings. Even further north, the lands of Scotland and the islands surrounding it, particularly the Orkneys, Shetlands, the Hebrides, and the strategic Isle of Man, saw significant and lasting Norse influence and widespread settlement. These islands, strategically located along key sailing routes between Scandinavia and Ireland, became vital stepping stones and powerful independent earldoms or key parts of a broader Norse maritime dominion. The Isle of Man, in particular, developed a remarkably unique and enduring Norse Gaelic culture, and its ancient Tynwald Assembly, a direct legacy of Viking governance and a parliamentary body, continues to meet to this very day, a living link to the Viking past. This period, from approximately 850 to 950 CE, truly illustrates the remarkable adaptability and expanding ambitions of the Viking phenomenon. What began as swift, brutal raids for portable wealth rapidly evolved into large-scale military campaigns, driven by a powerful desire for land, political control, and new homes. They were no longer simply perceived as destroyers. They were also formidable builders of towns, industrious farmers, and cunning founders of powerful, new kingdoms. Their impact was profound and irreversible, fundamentally reshaping the geopolitical map of the British Isles and laying the groundwork for complex cultural blends that would endure for centuries. The story of the Vikings was no longer just about taking. It was about staying, transforming the landscape, and creating a lasting legacy. While the great armies were meticulously reshaping the British Isles, the Vikings' ambitious gaze extended far beyond, restless and ever-seeking. Their remarkable longships, those true marvels of maritime engineering, were not confined to the stormy, familiar waters of the North Atlantic. Their shallow drafts and extraordinary versatility allowed them to become unparalleled instruments of exploration and, indeed, conquest across the vast European continent. They penetrated deep inland, navigating intricate river networks, and forged entirely new paths into the rich, distant lands of the East, connecting diverse worlds. This was a period when the Viking phenomenon truly became global, impacting myriad cultures and laying the foundations for new nations. In Frankia, the sprawling empire painstakingly built by Charlemagne, the Viking impact was profoundly and consistently felt, though it unfolded with a different character than in Britain. Here, a land crisscrossed by mighty rivers, the Seine, the Loire, the Rhine, the Garonne, became an irresistible network of liquid highways for Norse ambition. Unlike the more concentrated land grabs and widespread settlements seen in England, the Vikings in Francia often preferred a strategic combination of repeated, devastating raids and sophisticated, large-scale extortion. They would sail their formidable fleets, sometimes comprising hundreds of ships, far upriver, deftly bypassing coastal defenses to strike at wealthy monasteries and unfortified towns deep inland, where they were least expected. Renowned cities like Rouen and Nantes were sacked, their precious riches plundered. The venerable city of Paris itself famously endured several harrowing sieges, most notably the colossal one from 885 to 886 CE. For 13 long months, a massive Viking force, perhaps numbering in the tens of thousands, besieged the city, testing the very limits of its defenders. The desperate Frankish defense, ultimately aided by the future Emperor Charles the Fat and a substantial payment of tribute, starkly highlighted the profound vulnerability of even the most important urban centers to these determined seaborne warriors. This intense period in Francia also saw the widespread and highly effective implementation of Dangereld, a truly significant development that defined their strategy. Rather than engaging in prolonged, costly battles, Viking leaders increasingly demanded vast sums of silver, shimmering gold, and valuable goods from besieged Frankish kings and noblemen. These were paid in exchange for promises of peace, or simply for their immediate departure. This practice became an extraordinarily lucrative, albeit humiliating, source of income for the Vikings, demonstrating their growing power to dictate terms. The Frankish kings, often struggling with internal divisions, succession disputes, and lacking a unified naval strategy, frequently found it easier, though economically ruinous, to pay these enormous ransoms than to mount a truly effective and consistent defense. This constant, debilitating pressure, however, ultimately led to a truly remarkable and unforeseen outcome. In 911 CE, in a desperate yet shrewd attempt to finally end the relentless attacks in the region, the Frankish king Charles the Simple granted a powerful Viking chieftain named Rollo a vast territory in northern France, centered around the lower Seine River. This fertile land was given in exchange for Rollo's promise to convert to Christianity and, crucially, to protect the kingdom from any other Viking raiders. This pivotal act marked the birth of the powerful Duchy of Normandy, a name that itself echoes Northmen or Norsemen. It laid the foundational stones for one of medieval Europe's most dynamic and influential states, whose dukes would, in time, even conquer England itself in 1066. It was a remarkable testament to the Viking capacity for profound political adaptation, evolving from fearsome raiders to settled, sophisticated, and ultimately assimilated rulers. But the Viking saga was not confined to Western Europe's familiar shores. Indeed, one of their most remarkable and far-reaching expansions was to the east, deep into the vast, forested, and often sparsely populated lands that would one day become Russia. Here, Viking groups, primarily those originating from Sweden, journeyed not for land to farm, but for trade routes and the immense wealth they could generate. These enterprising Norsemen were known to the local Slavic and Finnic peoples as the Rus, a name that, in time, would give Russia its very name. Their chosen path was along the magnificent river systems of Eastern Europe, like the Neva, the Volkhov, the Dnieper, and the mighty Volga. These rivers were icy roads in the long winters and bustling watery highways in the warmer months, forming vital arteries that connected the Baltic Sea in the north to the glittering, rich markets of the Byzantine Empire in the south and the vast, wealthy Islamic caliphates in the distant east. The primary commodities driving this perilous eastern venture were furs, luxurious pelts of sable, ermine, and fox, highly prized in the sophisticated courts of Byzantium and Baghdad, along with amber from the Baltic coast, and, tragically, slaves, often captured from the local Slavic tribes. These precious goods were painstakingly transported along treacherous routes, requiring immense strength, unwavering courage, and shrewd cunning. The Rus faced formidable challenges, including dangerous river rapids, grueling overland portages where they had to drag their heavy ships and goods across land between river systems, and constant encounters with often hostile local tribes. Their ultimate destination to the south was the magnificent city of Constantinople, the opulent capital of the Byzantine Empire, where they exchanged their valuable commodities for exotic silk, aromatic spices, fine wine, and vast quantities of shimmering silver coinage. Even further east, their networks connected them with Islamic merchants, bringing back millions of Arabic silver dirhams, coins which are still found in immense hoards across Scandinavia today, a tangible link to this distant trade. As the first millennium drew to a close, the Viking Age stood at its zenith, a sprawling tapestry woven with threads of conquest, trade, and profound cultural exchange. But even as their influence stretched across 3 continents, from the frigid shores of the Arctic to the sun-drenched Mediterranean, and from the verdant fields of England to the vast plains of Russia, a new chapter was quietly, but powerfully, beginning to unfold. This final phase of their great saga would see their most daring explorations, pushing the boundaries of the known world, even as the very forces that had given rise to their distinctive age began to transform them from within. The period from 1000 to 1100 CE marks a significant pivot, the end of the Viking Age as we understand it, and the dawn of a new, Christianized Scandinavia. Their most audacious and geographically expansive ventures took them to the absolute edge of the Western world. Already masters of the North Atlantic, having settled Iceland in the late 9th century, a new frontier beckoned. Around 985 CE, a remarkable chieftain named Eric the Red, a fiery character originally exiled from Norway and then Iceland, set sail westward. His daring voyage led him to a vast, verdant land he shrewdly named Greenland, hoping its inviting name would attract settlers. And indeed, it did. Over the next centuries, two distinct Norse settlements, the eastern and western settlements, flourished on Greenland's southwestern coast, home to thousands of settlers who carved out a living farming, hunting, and fishing in that often unforgiving, yet beautiful, landscape. It stands as a testament to their incredible resilience and adaptability. But the spirit of exploration did not stop there. The sagas tell us of Leif Erikson, Eric the Red Son, a man driven by curiosity and perhaps tales of land further west. Around the year 1000 CE, Leif, a thoughtful and observant leader, set sail from Greenland. He and his crew discovered a land of vast forests and wild grapes, which he famously named Vinland, meaning wine land. This land, now widely identified as parts of North America, specifically the Elance Auxiliary Meadows site in Newfoundland, Canada, was a place of astonishing beauty and rich resources. Leif's discovery was followed by more ambitious, albeit challenging, attempts at settlement. Perhaps the most significant was led by Thorfinn Karlsefni, who, a few years after Leif, brought a larger expedition, including women and livestock, aiming to establish a permanent colony. These Norse settlers in Vinland were not alone. They encountered the indigenous peoples of North America, whom they called Skraelings, a term that simply meant wretches or barbarians, reflecting their foreignness rather than direct malice, though it could carry negative connotations. The sagas describe initial cautious trade, exchanging furs for milk and cloth. However, inevitable conflicts soon arose. The Norse, though skilled warriors, were vastly outnumbered and faced a landscape far from their familiar European ecosystems. The sheer distance from their Greenlandic and Icelandic support bases, the immense logistical challenges, and the persistent, often violent, resistance from the indigenous inhabitants ultimately proved insurmountable. After only a few years, the ambitious settlements in Vinland were abandoned. Yet, the fact remains, Vikings were the first Europeans to reach the shores of North America, nearly 500 years before Christopher Columbus, a feat of navigation and courage that still humbles us today. Beyond these epic southern voyages, Viking seafarers also ventured into the even more remote and frigid reaches of the Arctic. They sailed northward, far into the Barents Sea, hunting walruses for their valuable ivory and thick hides, and whales for their blubber and meat. These were not voyages of conquest, but of grim necessity and resource extraction, pushing the limits of human endurance in some of the harshest environments on Earth. Yet, even as their longships pushed the boundaries of geography, profound changes were sweeping through the Viking homelands. The most significant factor in the end of the Viking Age was arguably the widespread Christianization of Scandinavia. This was a slow, complex process, driven by various forces: missionaries from Europe, trade contacts, political alliances, and, crucially, the decisions of powerful kings. Figures like Olaf Tryggvason and Olaf II, Saint Olaf, in Norway, and Harald Bluetooth and Nut the Great in Denmark, embraced the new faith, often using it as a tool to centralize royal authority and integrate their kingdoms into the broader European Christian world. While conversion among the common people was gradual and sometimes met with resistance, by the early 11th century, the Old Norse gods were largely receding, replaced by the cross. Christianity brought new laws, new social values that discouraged raiding against fellow Christians, and a new identity that favored settled, ordered kingdoms over the independent, often chaotic, life of a raiding chieftain. Hand in hand with Christianization came the consolidation of royal power in Scandinavia. The same kings who championed Christianity also worked tirelessly to unite previously independent chieftaincies under a single crown. This meant less internal feuding and less opportunity for ambitious local jarls to organize large-scale independent raiding expeditions. The energies of the newly emerging kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden began to be directed towards internal development, formalized trade, and more conventional warfare against established European powers, rather than opportunistic plundering. Simultaneously, the rest of Europe was growing stronger and more resilient. Kingdoms that had once been fragmented and vulnerable learned hard lessons from Viking incursions. They developed more effective defenses, formidable stone castles that could withstand sieges, organized standing armies, and even their own navies to counter the Viking threat. Coastal defenses were improved, and communication networks became more efficient, allowing for quicker responses to attacks. The element of surprise, once the Vikings' greatest asset, became harder to achieve. The rich, undefended targets that had been so tempting in the 9th century were now often fortified and prepared. Finally, the very success of the Vikings led to their assimilation. In the lands they settled, whether the Danelaw in England, Normandy in France, Kievan Rus in the east, or the Hiberno Norse towns of Ireland, they gradually intermarried with the local populations, adopted their languages, and embraced their customs and religions. Over generations, the distinct Viking identity, rooted in pagan beliefs and a lifestyle of raiding and exploration, blended seamlessly into the fabric of these new societies. The fierce Norse warrior transformed into the English farmer, the French duke, the Russian prince, or the Irish merchant. The age of the roving Viking had given way to the age of the settled Scandinavian. By the mid-11th century, the era of widespread, independent Viking raids had largely faded. The last major Viking invasion of England, led by Harold Hardrada in 1066, ended in defeat at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, just weeks before the Norman conquest, itself led by descendants of Vikings. This symbolically marks the true end of the Viking Age as a distinct, defining historical period. But their legacy, far from ending, was profound and enduring. They were the architects of new trade routes, the founders of cities, the shapers of languages and legal systems. Their adventurous spirit paved the way for future global exploration. The Vikings, once the fury from the north, ultimately transformed into the sophisticated, Christianized kingdoms of Scandinavia, and their story remains one of the most compelling testaments to human ambition, adaptability, and the relentless quest for new horizons. As the 11th century drew to a close, the era of the independent Viking raid, as we've explored it, largely subsided. The longships no longer appeared unannounced on distant shores with the sole intent of plunder. The great armies had fragmented or assimilated, and the old pagan ways were replaced by the cross. Yet, to imagine that the influence of the Vikings simply vanished with the close of their dramatic age would be a profound misunderstanding. In truth, their most significant and lasting impact was perhaps felt precisely as their overt power waned. Like a powerful river, the Viking Age overflowed its banks, depositing fertile new soil that would nourish the cultural, political, and linguistic landscapes of Europe for centuries to come. Their legacy became interwoven into the very fabric of the continent, often in ways that are still visible and audible today. One of the most remarkable and pervasive aspects of the Viking legacy lies hidden in plain sight. within the English language itself. The Anglo-Saxons of England, who bore the brunt of many Norse invasions and settlements, were already speakers of Old English. But the arrival of the Old Norse language, brought by the Viking settlers who populated the vast region of the Danelaw, created a unique linguistic melting pot. Rather than one language simply replacing the other, they intermingled, a fascinating linguistic dance that profoundly enriched English. Imagine the conversations in the marketplaces and on the farms of the Danelaw, where Norse settlers and Anglo-Saxon locals gradually learned to communicate. Over time, countless Old Norse words became permanent fixtures in English, particularly those describing everyday life, common objects, and even fundamental concepts. Think about it. Words like sky, window, and husband are direct gifts from Old Norse. So are terms like law, take, give, and skill. Many words beginning with the sk- sound, such as skin, skirt, skull, scrape, and scream, are also Norse in origin, reflecting their presence in everyday life and action. Even words conveying simple emotions or states, like happy, ugly, and weak, found their way into the lexicon. It wasn't just individual words. The very grammar and structure of English were subtly influenced. The Norse language helped to simplify Old English grammar, making it more flexible and paving the way for the English we speak today. This linguistic fusion is a powerful, living testament to the deep, intimate interactions between two peoples, a daily reminder of the Viking presence. Beyond individual words, the Viking settlement left an indelible mark on the very landscape through place names. Across vast swathes of Britain, particularly in the Old Danelaw, but also in Scotland and the Scottish Isles, the Ordnance Survey map reads like a living record of Norse presence. Hundreds, even thousands, of villages, towns, and geographical features bear names of Old Norse origin. Any place ending in by, meaning farm or village, such as Derby, Rugby, or Whitby, immediately tells us of Viking settlement. Similarly, Thorpe, meaning hamlet or outlying farm, Thwaite, meaning clearing, and Dale, meaning valley, are clear Norse indicators. In Scotland, names with Kirk, meaning church, influenced by Norse, and in the islands of Orkney and Shetland, almost every place name has Norse roots. Even familiar city names like Dublin in Ireland, though originally an Irish settlement, took on its enduring name from the Norse Dyflin, meaning black pool, referring to a murky pool in the river. These place names are not just labels, they are living historical markers, silent witnesses to where Viking families lived, farmed, and built their communities long after their direct rule ended. The political and legal impacts of the Vikings were equally profound, shaping the very structure of governance in many parts of Europe. In England, the Danelaw was not merely a geographical area, it was a distinct legal and administrative region. While the English kings eventually regained political control, many Norse laws and customs persisted, blending with Anglo-Saxon traditions. The very concept of local self-governance and certain legal procedures bore the distinct imprint of Norse influence. Even the reforms undertaken by Alfred the Great and his successors, which ultimately led to a more unified English kingdom, were a direct, adaptive response to the Viking threat. They hardened the English state, forging a stronger, more resilient realm capable of withstanding future invasions. Centuries later, the brief, but powerful North Sea Empire of Knut the Great in the early 11th century, which united England, Denmark, and Norway under a single ruler, stands as a testament to the continued ambition and political sophistication of Viking-descended power, albeit now a Christianized and formalized one. Perhaps the most astonishing political legacy, however, emerged from Normandy. Here, the descendants of the Viking chieftain Rollo initially granted land to halt the raids, rapidly assimilated, adopting the French language and Christianity. Yet, they retained a fierce military prowess, an innovative spirit, and a keen sense of organization inherited from their Norse ancestors. This formidable new power, the Normans, became one of medieval Europe's most dynamic forces. Their ultimate, and arguably most famous, feat was the Norman conquest of England in 1066, led by William the Conqueror. This single event irrevocably changed England's destiny, introducing a new aristocracy, a new administrative system, and profoundly influencing the English language and culture. The Norman legacy extended far beyond England. They established powerful kingdoms in southern Italy and Sicily, leaving a lasting impact on architecture, governance, and culture across the Mediterranean. This chain of events, from raiding longships to French dukes conquering kingdoms, is a direct, undeniable thread woven from the Viking Age into the fabric of European history. In Eastern Europe, the impact was equally foundational. The Russ, those Swedish Norsemen who ventured eastward, played a critical role in the very formation of the early Russian states. Figures like Rurik and Oleg were not just adventurers. They became ruling princes, establishing a dynasty that would govern the nascent Kievan Rus for centuries. They controlled vast river trade networks, organized tribute from Slavic tribes, and created the framework for a political entity that would evolve into the powerful medieval Russian principalities. The cultural blending of Norse warrior elites with Slavic populations forged a new identity, and their eventual conversion to Eastern Orthodox Christianity further tied them to the Byzantine sphere of influence. Even in Ireland and Scotland, the Viking influence endured. The major towns of Ireland, like Dublin, Waterford, and Cork, owe their very existence as urban centers to Viking settlement. They became key nodes in the vast Viking trading network, flourishing into powerful maritime cities long after direct Norse rule faded. In the Scottish Isles, especially the Orkneys, Shetlands, and the Isle of Man, independent Norse earldoms persisted for centuries, maintaining distinct Norse legal traditions and social structures. The tin-walled assembly on the Isle of Man, for example, is one of the oldest continuous parliamentary bodies in the world, a direct institutional legacy of Viking governance and communal decision-making. Beyond politics and language, the Vikings were profound agents of cultural exchange and economic transformation. Their vast networks, stretching from North America to the Middle East, fundamentally reshaped medieval trade routes. They were not just pirates. They were astute merchants, connecting previously isolated regions and moving immense quantities of goods: furs, amber, slaves, silver, silks, spices, and exotic crafts. Their established trading hubs like Hedeby in Denmark, Birka in Sweden, and York in England became bustling cosmopolitan centers, drawing people and goods from across the known world, fostering a greater interconnectedness within Europe and beyond. This period of intensified trade contributed significantly to the economic growth and urbanization of medieval Europe. Their artistic legacy, too, is captivating. The Vikings developed a unique and powerful artistic style, characterized by intricate, often zoomorphic, animal-like, designs, flowing interlace patterns, and powerful symbolism. We see this artistry in their magnificent metalwork, brooches, pendants, sword hilts, and in their surviving wood carvings, ship decorations, and on the countless runestones scattered across Scandinavia and areas of their settlement. Distinct periods of Viking art styles, such as the boar, gelling, mammon, ringerike, and urn styles, showcase a vibrant artistic tradition that influenced and was influenced by the cultures they encountered. These beautiful artifacts are not just objects. They are windows into their worldview, their beliefs, and their remarkable craftsmanship. Even their legal and governmental traditions left an imprint. The concept of the thing, their open-air assemblies where free men debated laws and resolved disputes, found echoes in later medieval legal systems, particularly in Iceland with its Althing, one of the world's oldest parliaments, and the aforementioned Tynwald on the Isle of Man. These practices highlighted a more communal, decentralized approach to governance compared to the rigid feudal systems of much of continental Europe. Finally, the tireless work of archaeology continues to bring the Viking past to life in ways once unimaginable. Every dig, every unearthed longhouse foundation, every buried ship, every silver hoard, every meticulously preserved textile offers new insights into their daily lives, their beliefs, their craftsmanship, and the complex interactions they had with their world. These silent witnesses allow us to move beyond the myths and truly understand the industrious, artistic, and resilient people behind the sagas. So, while the thunder of their raids eventually subsided, the legacy of the Vikings proved to be far more profound than mere plunder. They were formidable agents of change, adventurers who explored the boundaries of the known world, and ultimately, indispensable contributors to the very foundations of medieval Europe's diverse cultures, languages, and political structures. Their story, far from ending with their conversion or the decline of raiding, became subtly woven into the ongoing narrative of human civilization. As we have journeyed through the historical saga of the Vikings, from their quiet Scandinavian beginnings to their audacious global reach and the profound, tangible legacies they left behind, it becomes clear that their story is not merely one of facts and dates, of raids and settlements. It is also a narrative deeply woven into the very fabric of human imagination, a rich tapestry where history intertwines with myth, and memory becomes legend. Long after the last longship completed its final voyage of conquest or trade, and the last pagan king embraced the cross, the idea of the Viking continued to evolve, transforming into a powerful, multifaceted archetype. This segment will explore how the Viking spirit has been preserved, reinterpreted, and sometimes gloriously exaggerated within their own ancient literature through the transformative lens of later Romanticism and within the vibrant, pervasive landscape of modern popular culture. Our most profound and authentic window into the Viking mind, their deepest beliefs, their values, and their historical memory comes directly from their own extraordinary literary treasures, the sagas and the Eddas. These magnificent works, primarily preserved and meticulously written down in medieval Iceland, a testament to its unique intellectual environment, are not just captivating tales, they are invaluable primary sources. They allow us to hear the voices of a lost world, reflecting the Norse worldview, their complex social codes, and their often stark, fatalistic understanding of destiny. Let's first consider the sagas. These are vast prose narratives, typically divided into several categories. The Íslendingasaga, or Sagas of Icelanders, are arguably the most historically grounded. They recount the lives and often violent deeds of powerful Icelandic families, tracing intricate feuds, legal disputes, and quests for honor during the island's early settlement period, roughly 930–1030 CE. Think of gripping narratives like Enjal's Saga, which explores the tragic consequences of escalating vendettas and the complexities of Norse law, or Gréta's Saga, about a formidable but cursed outlaw. Then there are the Konungasaga, the King's Sagas, which chronicle the lives and reigns of the Norwegian kings, most famously compiled by the brilliant Icelander Snorri Sturluson in his Heimskringla. These provide a more traditional historical narrative, albeit one still infused with heroic embellishment. Finally, the Fornaldarsaga, or legendary sagas, delve further back into mythical and heroic pre-settlement times, often featuring dragons, magic swords, and interactions with gods, blurring the line between history and pure fantasy, like the legendary Volsunga Saga, which inspired later works like the Nibelungenlied and Tolkien's Middle-earth. Across all these sagas, key themes resonate: the paramount importance of honor, reputation, vengeance, and the avoidance of shame, the inexorable hand of Wyrd, fate or destiny, the deep significance of family loyalty and lineage, and the often brutal realities of their world, where law and violence frequently intertwined. The literary quality of the sagas is astonishing for their time. Their stark, understated prose, dramatic irony, psychological depth in character portrayal, and a minimalist style that often leaves much to the reader's imagination, creating a unique and powerful reading experience. Then there are the Eddas, our most crucial sources for Norse mythology itself. The Poetic Edda is a collection of ancient, anonymous poems, brimming with vibrant imagery and powerful vows. Here we find profound cosmological insights in poems like the Völuspá, Prophecy of the Cirrus, which recounts the creation of the world from the primordial void of Ginnungagap, the lives of the gods, and the inevitable destruction and rebirth in Ragnarok. We also find ethical wisdom in the Havamal, sayings of the High One, attributed to Odin himself, offering guidance on life, friendship, and wisdom. And then there are more humorous or dramatic mythological tales, like Thrymskvida, where Thor famously dresses as a bride to retrieve his stolen hammer. These poems are rich with kennings, poetic circumlocutions like Whale Road for sea, and Haiti, poetic synonyms, showcasing the sophisticated nature of Norse poetic tradition. Complementing this is the prose Edda, written by the brilliant Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century. Snorri, a chieftain, poet, and scholar, compiled this work primarily as a textbook for aspiring skalds, Norse poets, aiming to preserve the knowledge of Norse myths so that future generations could understand the complex allusions in old poetry. It meticulously explains the pantheon of gods, Aesir and Vani, their intricate relationships, their adventures, and the cosmic struggle against giants and other forces of chaos. Snorri's work is invaluable, providing a structured narrative of Norse cosmology, from the creation story to the details of Valhalla, where fallen warriors feast with Odin, awaiting Ragnarok. These texts, painstakingly preserved, offer a profound glimpse into a deeply spiritual people, where the forces of nature, fate, and heroic action were intrinsically linked. Yet, the image of the Viking that dominates much of our modern popular imagination was not forged entirely from these ancient, nuanced texts. It was dramatically, and sometimes quite explicitly, reshaped in the 19th century, a period of intense romanticism and burgeoning nationalism across Europe. This era saw a fervent Viking revival, a powerful intellectual and artistic movement that swept through Scandinavia, Germany, and Great Britain. Scholars, artists, poets, and composers enthusiastically rediscovered the sagas and Eddas, reinterpreting the Vikings through the lens of their own contemporary desires for robust national identity, heroic ancestral figures, and a sense of rugged strength untainted by the burgeoning industrial age. In Germany, the composer Richard Wagner's monumental operatic cycle, Der Ring des Nibelungen, premiering in the 1870s, drew heavily on Norse and Germanic mythology. The elaborate costume designs for these productions, famously featuring horned helmets for the Viking-inspired characters, cemented this historically inaccurate image in the public consciousness, a visual shorthand that has endured for a century and a half. This period also saw a strong desire to link modern Germanic peoples to a pure, ancient, powerful ancestry. Similarly, in Scandinavia, as countries like Norway gained independence from Sweden, and as Denmark redefined itself, the Viking past became a powerful symbol for newly emerging national identities. Artists like Erik Gustav Geiger and writers across the Nordic nations embraced the Viking narrative, celebrating them as brave explorers, independent free spirits, and noble warriors, archetypes that resonated deeply with the romantic ideals of the time, often glorifying their strength and adventurous spirit. In Britain, Victorian writers like William Morris and Alfred, Lord Tennyson, drew inspiration from Norse mythology and sagas, contributing to a broader European fascination. This era, while giving rise to scholarly interest and archaeological endeavors, such as the excavation of the Gokstad ship in 1880, also solidified many of the persistent, yet historically inaccurate, stereotypes. The horned helmet is the most famous example, but also the image of Vikings as uniformly brutish, unwashed, and solely focused on mindless destruction. This often served as a convenient, barbaric contrast to the perceived civilization of their Christian European victims, or conversely, as a romanticized, untamed ideal for those seeking a more primal heroism. This complex, often contradictory, dual portrayal of both noble savage and fearless adventurer laid the groundwork for how we perceive them even now, a potent blend of awe and apprehension. Today, the Viking spirit continues to thunder through our popular culture with undeniable force, transcending historical periods and media. From blockbuster movies and compelling television series to immersive video games, a diverse range of literature, and even commercial branding, their stories are constantly reimagined, interpreted, and sometimes creatively distorted for new generations. Television series like History Channel's Vikings and Netflix's The Last Kingdom, and more recently Vikings, Valhalla, have brought their world to millions globally. These productions, while undeniably entertaining and hugely popular, often take considerable artistic license, blurring the lines between historical fact, archaeological speculation, and dramatic storytelling. They frequently portray heightened violence, simplified social structures, and chronological compressions, prioritizing character drama and visceral action. However, their immense success also has a profoundly positive aspect. They ignite immense public curiosity, inspiring countless viewers to delve deeper, to seek out the genuine history behind the captivating myths. Even children's animated features, like How to Train Your Dragon, offer surprisingly nuanced and positive portrayals of Viking communities, emphasizing bravery, ingenuity, and a connection to nature. The world of video games has become a particularly fertile ground for Viking reimagination, offering players an unprecedented interactive experience. Titles like God of War, 2018 and Ragnarok, while fantastical, immerse players in a rich, often grim, interpretation of Norse mythology, focusing on the gods, their conflicts, and the visceral nature of combat. Assassin's Creed Valhalla allows players to explore a vast, open-world rendition of Viking Age England, engaging in raids, building settlements, and exploring the intricate belief systems of the time. Even fantasy games like Bethesda's Skyrim, part of the Elder Scrolls series, though not directly about Vikings, draw heavily on Norse aesthetics, architecture, and mythical creatures, demonstrating the pervasive influence of the Viking archetype. These games allow a global audience to not just observe, but experience a Viking world, even if it's a fictionalized one. Beyond visual media and games, the literary world continues to explore Viking themes. Historical fiction authors like Bernard Cornwell with his Saxon stories, the basis for The Last Kingdom, strive for a blend of accuracy and gripping narrative, while fantasy authors like Neil Gaiman offer fresh, engaging retellings of Norse mythology. The musical landscape, too, is profoundly influenced. Genres like Viking metal and folk metal blend traditional Nordic sounds and instruments with heavy rock, often featuring lyrical themes drawn directly from sagas and eddas, celebrating ancient gods, battles, and landscapes. And in more everyday contexts, the powerful, enduring image of the Viking can be seen in sports mascots, brewery names, and a vast array of merchandise, a testament to their universal recognition and symbolic power. It is crucial, amidst this vibrant and pervasive cultural landscape, to continually return to the historical truth and distinguish myth from reality. While the horned helmet remains iconic, archaeological evidence confirms no such headgear was worn in battle. They were likely ceremonial, if they existed at all. The notion of Vikings as perpetually unwashed, crude savages is also largely a myth. Archaeological finds consistently show they possessed combs, ear spoons, tweezers, and were quite concerned with personal hygiene. Most importantly, portraying them solely as bloodthirsty raiders is a vast oversimplification. While raiding was undeniably a brutal and defining aspect of their early period, it was one facet of a much more complex existence. The historical reality reveals a far more fascinating people. They were highly skilled craftsmen who produced exquisite jewelry, intricate wood carvings, and sophisticated tools. They were industrious farmers who worked the land and raised livestock. They were peerless navigators and shipbuilders, understanding ocean currents, stars, and wind patterns with astonishing precision. They were shrewd traders, forging vast commercial networks that connected distant lands and moved diverse goods. They developed complex social structures with intricate laws, public assemblies, the things, and a clear hierarchy. Their religious beliefs were rich and nuanced, far from crude paganism, involving deep reverence for nature, ancestor worship, and a cyclical view of creation and destruction. The academic work of archaeologists, linguists, and historians continues to peel back layers of myth, revealing a people whose lives were as varied and full as any other. The enduring fascination with the Vikings is a testament to the powerful, universal themes their story embodies: the thrill of adventure and daring exploration, the deep desire for freedom and self-reliance, the immense strength and resilience required to overcome harsh environments, and the profound mystery of a distinct, ancient culture. They represent an almost primal, unbridled energy, a spirit of pushing boundaries that resonates with something deep within the human psyche. They stand as an archetype for explorers, pioneers, and those who dare to venture into the unknown, forever shaping both the literal and imaginative maps of our world. So, the Viking spirit, in its myriad forms, both the gritty historical truth and the grand, romanticized myth, remains a powerful and compelling force in our collective consciousness. From the epic sagas written on ancient vellum to the digital sagas played out on our screens, they continue to inspire, challenge, and sometimes mystify us. They remind us that history is not just a collection of facts, but a living narrative, constantly being retold and reimagined, enriching our present with echoes of a remarkable past. We began our voyage by stepping back, far into the quiet centuries preceding the roar of the longship, to understand the meticulous evolution of Scandinavian society. We then witnessed the explosive dawn of the Viking Age, marked by the shocking raid on Lindisfarne, driven by a complex tapestry of ambition, opportunity, and unparalleled maritime prowess. We charted their relentless expansion across the British Isles, where raiders transformed into settlers, establishing the enduring Danelaw and laying the foundations for some of Europe's most influential future states. Our journey then took us across the vast European continent, following their riverine routes into Francia, where they extorted tribute and ultimately forged the mighty Duchy of Normandy, a pivotal moment in the shaping of Western Europe. We ventured eastward, along the great river highways, where the Rus established vital trade networks and laid the very groundwork for early Russian states. And in their most breathtaking display of daring exploration, we traced their path westward, across the unforgiving North Atlantic, to the shores of Greenland and, incredibly, to the distant, untouched lands of North America. Then, we explored the gradual, yet profound, transformation of the Viking Age itself, the shift from paganism to Christianity, the consolidation of powerful monarchies in Scandinavia, and the eventual assimilation of the Viking peoples into the fabric of the lands they had once conquered. Finally, we delved into the enduring legacy, recognizing how their spirit continues to resonate in our language, place names, legal systems, and within the vibrant tapestry of modern myth and popular culture. When we look back, the Vikings occupy a truly unique and compelling place in history. They were a force of disruption and creation, embodying a dynamic paradox. On one hand, they were undoubtedly feared for their ferocity and destructive power, leaving a trail of shattered monasteries and plundered towns. Yet, on the other, they were equally remarkable for their entrepreneurial spirit, their extraordinary adaptability, and their profound capacity for innovation. They were not merely destructive marauders, they were also sophisticated traders, master craftsmen, cunning politicians, and intrepid explorers. They acted as powerful catalysts for change across Europe. Their relentless pressure forced disparate kingdoms to consolidate, to build stronger defenses, and to develop more cohesive national identities. The very nature of warfare and governance adapted in response to their unique maritime threat. They were the bridge builders of their age, forging new connections that knit together disparate parts of the world, from the pagan north to Christian Europe, from the familiar west to the distant Byzantine and Islamic empires of the east, and critically, from the old world to the uncharted territories of the new. Their trade networks, often born from initial raids, became lifelines, moving goods, ideas, and people across vast distances, stimulating economies and fostering urbanization wherever they settled. Their story is a powerful testament to the enduring human spirit of ambition, resilience, and ingenuity. The Vikings embraced the unknown, pushed the boundaries of technology, and carved out new destinies in a world that was both vast and perilous. They showed an extraordinary capacity to adapt to wildly different environments and opportunities, whether it was farming in the challenging climate of Iceland, governing bustling trading cities in Ireland, serving as elite mercenaries in Constantinople, or embarking on perilous voyages across the vast ocean to uncharted lands. The end of the Viking Age, around the mid-11th century, was not a sudden, dramatic collapse, but rather a profound transformation and assimilation. The rise of strong, centralized Christian monarchies in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden meant that the independent raiding chieftains no longer had the same freedom or incentive to organize foreign expeditions. The energies of these burgeoning kingdoms were redirected towards internal consolidation, formalized trade, and participation in the wider, Christian European political landscape. The Viking identity gradually gave way to a Scandinavian one, as the people of the north became integrated members of Christendom, albeit with a unique and proud heritage rooted in their formidable past. The descendants of these formidable Norsemen, who once struck terror into the hearts of monks and kings, became the very rulers and citizens of the established European nations, their distinctive cultural traits blending into a richer, more complex tapestry. Ultimately, the true legacy of the Vikings transcends the simple narrative of raiders and warriors. They were a people of immense complexity and astonishing adaptability. They were both destroyers and creators, fierce in battle yet deeply concerned with law and honor, pragmatic in trade yet profoundly spiritual in belief. Their enduring fascination in our modern world speaks to something timeless within their story: the allure of adventure, the courage to face the unknown, the resilience to endure hardship, and the sheer audacity to challenge the limits of their world. They remind us that history is never static, never simple. It is a constantly unfolding narrative of human endeavor, marked by both profound conflict and remarkable cooperation, by the destruction of old orders and the vibrant creation of new ones. The Viking Age, though relatively brief in the grand sweep of time, irrevocably shaped the course of European history, connecting disparate lands and cultures, and leaving an indelible mark that resonates even in our lives today. Their journey may have ended, but their spirit, in countless forms, continues to sail on.